Welcome to my GRC POV. Before we begin, please note that all views, opinions, and commentary expressed by my guests and me are strictly our own personal perspectives. They do not represent or reflect the official positions of any employers, organizations, or affiliations we may have. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. Always consult with qualified professionals for your specific GRC needs. Now let's dive in. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my GRC POV. This is the podcast where we talk about govern, risk, and compliance as we operate in the real world. I am your host, Monica Rieger, and today's episode focuses on cybersecurity, AI, and how leaders make risk decisions under pressure. So my guest today is a CISP certified cybersecurity advisor, a senior IEEE member, and an author of GRC Maturity Model. As he serves as a CISO in defense, and he served at a CISO at a GRC startup, he has spent nearly 3 decades helping organizations align security, compliance, and business outcomes. So listen, I am super excited about this guest. I know you're going to be really, really impressed. So why don't we welcome to our community none other than Kayne McGladrey. Kayne, welcome to my GRC POV and to the community. How are you, sir? It's so good to see you.
Thanks, Monica. I'm doing well. And when you were reading that intro, I was wondering if you were talking about somebody else. I was going, wait a second, she's going to have a better guest on than me. So again, thank you. I love what you're doing with the show by making GRC a lot more accessible to a broader audience so that it doesn't feel like some niche discipline that, you have to be super specialized to get into. I think that I love the podcast, basically, as a GRC practitioner myself.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's one of the things that it is my desire and hope that we can make this a little bit more tangible. It's not something that people should fear. Yes, we know we are the individuals that try to give you guidance as you do your day-to-day operations and produce outcomes for your organization. But those who are trying to transition in this field, it can be a bit daunting because there's, especially in cybersecurity, there's the tech side of it, and there's the soft skills and policy side of it, and trying to make this as you probably need all of it. So let's all work together and build a community together. So I am uber happy to have you here. So can you tell us, how did you get started in your GRC? What's your current role? Let us know who Kayne McGladrey is.
Sure. So my origin story is pretty unlikely. I'm a theater kid. I basically realized that there was no chance of me singing and dancing on Broadway, so I pivoted into consulting. And what I found in security consulting, really, and this has been true for a long time, is that there's a continuing kind of a failure to communicate between cybersecurity leaders, risk leaders, and then the rest of the business. And a lot of it has to do with our different life experiences as well as our different educational backgrounds. Now, I don't have one, so I'm at least immune from that.
Right.
But something that I've seen consistently is where the CISO or the senior cybersecurity leader wants to phrase everything as a negative, or they want to phrase it as a risk, and they want to give vanity metrics, and they don't actually communicate adequately with the rest of the business. I think where I really started to see that break down I was at a cybersecurity startup where I was running worldwide professional services, and we were doing authentication, authorization. And what we generally found drove deployments was not the technology. It had very little to do with the technology. The technology could have been anything, honestly.
Yeah.
It was the risk associated with litigation, or it was the risk associated with governmental investigations, not necessarily a data breach. That's a cause that leads to that effect. People wanted to avoid the effect. I was doing, later in my career, I was doing executive advisory on 3 continents, and then just nationally, where companies would bring me and my teams in to figure out, like, the board would bring us in and say, hey, is the CISO cybering hard enough? Or the CISO would bring us in because they thought the board thought they weren't cybering hard enough. And so we'd have to look at, like, what's their regulatory, what's their contractual, and what's their legal obligations to their customers, to the market, to whatever areas they serve. And what I found a lot of was some companies could produce evidence, some companies couldn't produce adequate and sufficient evidence, but what was more interesting is how they behaved. Did they panic when they got asked the question, send us your written information security plan, or send us a screenshot of like how you've got a given tool? Or did they have a great answer and it was just on lock? And in the time of doing that, I started to realize there are companies out there that really prioritize this, and there are companies that don't. But in common between all of that was GRC was still perceived as a cost center. It was perceived as something that, much like cybersecurity actually, where
Right.
it cost money, but it didn't do
Yeah.
anything for the business. People weren't
Yeah.
phrasing it as this is a competitive advantage that will allow us to get a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001, or it allow us to have better relationships and build better trust with our customers. So the last shop I was at, my buddy Matt said, hey, Kayne, we're going to build a tool that does that instead of you doing it as a consultant where you're ingesting all of that data and trying to make a determination of how well a company is meeting their obligations. We want to make that accessible to auditors. We want to make that to CISOs. We want to make that for cybersecurity professionals. Absolutely delighted. Spent a fun 3 years there. And now I'm on the open market, actually.
Wow. Wow. I mean, first of all, it's exactly where we are as an industry, right? Now we have to contend with the expertise of an expert or professional in GRC, but now there's so many tools that are out there that should be helping us. Definitely to automate some of those processes, and collect evidence quicker, be able to kind of see things in real time. But at the end of the day, you still need that human aspect to really dissect or to decipher between, is this really a valid information, or is this something that may be hallucinating, providing some type of marginal error, whatever that may be. But that comes from that expertise. So wow, that's really, really great, because I think for me as a fellow cybersecurity compliance expert, if you will, I hear that all the time, right? It's trying to articulate the value that your team brings. So no, we're not necessarily. Well, I think I'm gonna say this, and then I might just add additional caveat to that. Initially, it was they were not seeing the revenue that we can actually generate or prevent, right? And again, your business executives are typically looking for the dollar and cent bottom line. But even now, I think since the pandemic, because companies are looking for you to respond to security assessments early on prior to the actual contract being signed, I think there's another way to be tangible to really show what your sell or how you're impacting sell, which is again your revenue. And so kind of reframing that ideology, I think, is important to your point. So years ago, I totally agree. There was just very difficult for either in compliance or cybersecurity to say, we are actually helping your organization because it actually is a competitive advantage. But I think now, because most companies are asking, before I sign a contract, before I look at a PO, let me understand your security posture. And that is a way to actually indicate what your value is that you're bringing to the table, if you can translate into dollar cents for anybody that actually cares or listens. So I totally agree with you, Kayne, there. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you brought up a really great point about your experience at how it shaped how you see or think about risk today. But even then, many of the organizations are still struggling on how they define cyber risk. So what do most leaders, in your opinion, misunderstand most when they frame cyber risk as a standalone category or cost center instead of an actual business condition?
So I actually talk about this in my upcoming book, which is coming out I'm working with the publisher right now. I chose not to self-publish, so it'll be something you can go to a library and get, which I
Nice.
love. Is just a great idea. But what it comes down to is it's a language barrier more than anything else. When we treat cyber as a distinct category of risk, what we're saying as CISOs or senior professionals is, hey, look, this is too hard. You need experts. You need us. And because we often have these certifications up on our walls, and because we use different terms than the other business leaders, what that does is it gives them a reason to mentally check out of a conversation, right? And what that leads to is misalignment and a lot of misunderstandings. I mean, the rubric that I use is, the next time you're in front of the board or senior leadership talking about how you're cybering and how you're risking, like, watch people's body language. Are they checking their mobile? Are they looking bored? Or are they actually engaged in the conversation? Because if they're not engaged, then you're probably presenting something that's not interesting to them. Or alternatively, you did a really good pre-read and they don't have any questions, at which point you can just like do the 5-minute meeting and go drink a cup of coffee. But that's rarely what happens. Often what happens is we want to treat cyber, and the whole certification industry really does promote this language, much to our detriment. Whereas if you go to like a business school, and you see what they're teaching our MBAs who are going to be future business leaders, cyber is at least getting some, a little bit of coverage, but not as a distinct risk category. It's not a distinct risk category. It's a business risk category. And so that inability, and it's getting better, but that there are CISOs out there who still want to talk about cyber risk. And I don't think it's a real thing in the world. I think what companies care about is what is the impact to the business? Like if you can't do a basic business impact analysis, a BIA, it's probably not an actual honest to goodness risk out there that you're trying to describe, but this perpetuation. If you go, the first CISO came out, 40 years ago or so, I think, ish. We're getting into that period of time. Like they had to make all this stuff as they went, right? They eventually figured out, we're talking about business risks here. We're not talking about technical risks. Now, technical risks 100% exist, and they certainly are a factor that will influence a business risk from occurring or from not occurring. And when we're talking to our teams, it's fine to code switch and talk about cyber risks as though they're a thing. But when we're talking to other people in the business or business unit owners or departmental leaders, we have to translate straight business onto them, because if we don't, we risk obsolescence.
Yeah, I that is such an excellent point, and I really like when you said you have to code switch. The ability to code switch between business language and technical language is critical for anyone in this space, especially in cybersecurity. So you have your very technical engineers, your leads, your architects, your designers, and they're brilliant. But then you have to have that business conversation. I even want to add a third component of that for myself. With my team, we do a lot of the vendor risk assessments intake, meaning we're the team that your customers will send to questionnaires to us and say, hey, we want to know about your security posture. My team handles that. And so oftentimes we're the ones on those security calls, not necessarily our engineers or our technical team, but we are. And so we actually have to additionally code switch to more a customer-based language that's even more palatable or tangible. Unless you get someone who's super technical on the call, then you have to code switch in between. But for the most part, it is understanding the business language so that you can communicate the needs and the resources that is necessary to be successful. But the other part of that is the technical side, so you can get things done. But I actually have to just drop a third one in there, is when you actually have to get in front of your customers, and you may not get the actual technical person in the room. You may get a lawyer in the room who wants to just run through, an ISA, which is an information security agreement, or some type of contract, or just they want to check all the boxes because they've asked the right questions. And again, they may or may not understand exactly what they're asking. So there may be some evolution, or has been some evolution, I think, around how we approach and see cybersecurity as a whole, and how that relates to compliance, because now we're not just talking a specific technical field, but we're also talking, we have to be in front of customers, our end users, and we have to be in front of the business, and some of us have to be in front of the board, and all of those all of them speak different languages. And so I wanted to continue on that conversation. So as a CISO in defense and in the GRC startup, what execution gaps were repeated across both of those environments?
For the defense ones, I'm going to have to keep it pretty light.
Yeah, sure. We don't want any issues here, but I just wanted to talk about.
I'll just take all the documentation and send it to ChatGPT. It'll be fine.
Sure.
It'll be totally fine. No, but I can think of two things really. Just on defense, actually, I also was a contractor or consultant to a bunch of named entities that are prime contractors. So I've kind of seen I want to go on your third-party risk management just on the start. I think historically, across both of those environments, actually, as well as a lot of other ones, there's what you said, it's a checkbox exercise. It's a due diligence contracting exercise. It's not actually a way of making a determination of, hey, this is important. A good friend of mine recently, we sat down, had coffee, and he made a stunning point that most companies will do the TPRM questionnaire, they'll send the SAIQ, they will send the 6,000 question Excel document, they
Yes,
will
those are
get
so
all
painful.
of the responses. Some of those responses will be negative, and they'll still do the thing. And they'll still buy the product, they'll still deploy the thing, because his point that he was making is it's more important to talk to the other business leaders of, so what are the three things? What are the three red lines we cannot cross? And I think that really helps shift the conversation around, because if you think about historically how TPRM has been done, it's kind of felt a bit theatrical. It's performative. It's not actually reducing risk in a lot of cases if you go, hey, we're accepting this risk anyway. Now, the key to that, though, is in those environments, categorically, they did not have a good TPRM and risk sign-off acceptance process. And this is what ultimately, back in the day, led to DFARS. And DFARS was, interestingly enough, I was on a DFARS project where in 6 weeks, a major defense contractor had 3 tracks going. Track 1 was up on Capitol Hill. Track 2 was my track, which was to get a multi-billion-dollar company to get all of their cybersecurity controls in place under DFARS. And track 3 was a lawsuit they were pursuing. Well, what ended up happening under DFARS, and all the contractors kind of ran the same playbook, is they were said, yeah, you can do a self-attestation. You can just sign off on this, that, yeah, we're totally cybering just fine. Please leave us alone. What that led to now is our state of play of CMMC, where we said, cool, we're going to trust and we're not going to verify. Well, 99% of defense contractors didn't deploy those controls because they didn't see the risk associated with it. There was no material downside to them, and people still kept buying their thing, whatever it might be, whether it was bootlaces or whether it was a full assembly of a redacted object. Right? They didn't see
Yeah.
any consequences of doing TPRM poorly in their supply chains, which has now led to CMMC. The other thing that I've seen, and this is, again, consistent across so many companies, is data classification and labeling.
Yeah.
And there's, let's hypothetically say I was hypothetically at a company and we might have had an engineer who may have hypothetically received a full schematic for something that flies, and I can't talk about. And they received that from the prime and it wasn't labeled. Just, here's a full assembly. Would you like to build one of these in your back garden? That's fine. You can totally do that. So we had to hypothetically put all of our email servers, hard drives in the wood chipper and receive and restore from backup. The advantage of
Wow.
working in mechanical engineering environments is you have industrial shredders that you can go, cool, all of that we have to burn now. Just get rid of it. But if you think of now today's problems that we have associated with artificial intelligence and data governance and actually doing good training for models, again, it comes down to the same problem of, are you actually labeling and classifying your data? And coincidentally, are you following your retention or disposition schedules? Which,
Right.
again, I find companies historically don't do that well. And that only serves to increase risk. But if you phrase it in technology terms, whoop, gone. MBA folks, they don't care. Maybe your attorney friend, maybe you've got a good relationship with your general counsel or your chief counsel or chief compliance officer. Maybe they understand what you're talking about when you say, like, hey, if we don't follow our data disposition schedule and get rid of stuff, we're going
Yeah.
to have a bad time. Very few other people get into that level of nuance, unfortunately. And then you go, well, why can't we train our AI model very well? Why does it have all of this erroneous data? Well, let's see. We've been keeping things for 20 years that we shouldn't have been keeping, and we've been giving it access to classified data that it shouldn't have had access to. Again, these are systemic problems that I can say that they're getting better, but you have to be forward thinking about it. And if I think of either of those, like, those are problems that we've had for 20 years that CISOs still keep banging their heads against because they haven't made an adequate business case for it. And the
Yeah.
compliance team hasn't made an adequate, this is how it makes us faster, better, cheaper, right? One of
Right.
those three things, if you can't make it in that business terms, it's a very hard conversation.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's interesting because we find that data, the data classification, um, in its nuance, especially in cloud security, because oh my goodness, you have storage accounts, you have containers, you have all of these things that contains data. And what I am finding in varying environments is that there are times where they don't even know what's in those storage accounts. What data are you collecting? Is it audit logs, diagnostics settings, analytics, whatever it is? And so when you start as a compliance person that has the cybersecurity background, you start asking those questions. They're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, how are you managing your retention process, right? And then if you're keeping things indefinitely, okay, is it necessary to keep it indefinitely? And the other thing that I find is quite interesting, especially in cloud specifically, not all data is equal, has the same equal value, right? And so
100%.
you have some data that you may collect millions of pieces of data daily, so you can only keep it for what, 7 days, 90 days, but you have to be able to articulate that and justify that level of retention throughout your environment. So there may be additionally, and for those who are watching, okay, you have two cybersecurity nerds in this episode, so we're geeking out here. But for the most part, ideally, all of us understands that you keep backups or data for at least a year. Well, not all data is actually equal. So some that you can keep for 90 days, some you can keep for 7 days, depending upon what you're collecting, and depending upon how critical that data is to your environment. So it is important to understand from a technical perspective what's in your environment. Don't let the technology do it for you. You have to classify that data appropriately. But then you also have to use, to Kayne's point, the business language. How do you articulate that to cost value? And I can tell you from a person in cybersecurity, if you can reduce costs in a cloud environment, hey, we're not keeping all of this because it's going to increase our storage account or our blog container cost, because you get 0.07% or whatever those values are for each bit of data. They're going to love that. And you may have to increase it somewhere else if the data value is critical to your organization or to the system. So with all of that being said, as we continue to geek out on this, I am totally excited.
I want to come in on the back of that, actually,
Yeah.
before we go to the next question. So I want to go up a level and down a level. Let's go up a level first. So the other thing that presupposes, and this is a continuous failure and it happens in civilian systems, it doesn't happen in defense systems. The idea of the word system. Like this thing right here, this is not a system. This computer I am talking on, this is not a system. A system is a collection of stuff that does a thing for the business. You have your accounts payable system, you have your accounts receivable system, you have your marketing system, whatever system you have. In military systems and in federal information systems, those are well defined. And so if you want to say we want to do a cost reduction, like you just said, by implementing better data retention and disposition rules on our system, you can then say, what are all the piece parts where this stuff could possibly live? Well, if you're working with a typical commercial system, that's not something that exists commonly. Now, maybe if you're in a publicly traded company, those are the computers that do Sarbanes-Oxley and they're magic and we can't go near them. And the rest of it's just kind of this unknown horror show where people spin stuff up and we don't have a good system inventory. So that's the first thing that I've seen as a consistent challenge that can either, if we rotate into it, it can give us a better narrative. The other thing I'd say, just to click down a level, what that also drives is problems around legal retention and legal hold. And all of your attorney friends who are watching this episode are going to go, oh, he went there. Because what I found is where companies put a legal retention or a legal hold on a person or an individual, which is a normal thing in business that happens. Usually HR will say, we have to put a hold on this person. Cool, so you're under investigation. You don't know you're under investigation. Everything's getting backed up. You can't delete any of your files. You can't delete any of your chat GPT prompts. You can't delete any of your business records you're creating. Neat. Well, that eventually ends. The litigation maybe gets settled. The litigation maybe goes to full trial and comes up a discovery. Cool, it's a public record. What doesn't ever happen, though, is people go, oh, we should delete that stuff, too.
Yeah.
You find this often where a company has had a disposition where they've been part of a whole bunch of employees have been part of a disposition and discovery process, and their files are still around. Right.
Yeah.
And those are definitely not the sorts of things you want to be keeping like longer than you need to. But again, having that lack of discipline of this is a system, this is where all of its stuff lives, this is where all of its stuff is processed, that really complicates not just storage and defense strategies, but also when you're thinking, so how do we bring this thing back up? Like if you think about your standard RTO, RPO, where you're actually going to bring a system back online within a certain amount of time, it'd sure
Right.
be neat if you knew what the system was made out of anymore. And I think that's something that, IT people, we really love building new things, and we're really poor at documenting them, and we're really terrible about getting rid of them. Right?
I agree. And that's where the challenge is for, all of us who are a part of the policy management crew, I like to say, where we're like, hey, we need documentation. What's in here? Right. And of course, they're looking at us with 12 heads because they're like, what do you mean what's in there? I have to go back and look? Sure. Yes, you have to go back and look because I need it. It's definitely an ongoing conversation. So I want to make sure that everybody understands if you're watching this episode, and you're in cybersecurity or in compliance, the conversation is the same across the board. So it's not just one-sided. And I'm so glad you brought up those additional gaps, Kayne, because it is important to talk about some of the operational friction that you often see in varying environments. And also, again, is there's this barrier, which is not intentional. It's just a barrier between different understandings. You got your business side, you have your technical side, and then you have your customer. And the customer has a different perspective or objective. And oftentimes they're just trying to make sure they do their job. So they're, all hands off, right? If something happens, I did what I was supposed to do, kind of thing. And so you did bring up something that I thought was really important. And I wanted to kind of circle back just a tidbit, and to really expand on that is, so AI now sits in the center of cyber compliance governance conversations a lot. I mean, it continues to evolve, and it impacts our day to day, not only just in how we live our lives, but it's also impacting how companies are seeing or trying to reevaluate their own retention process and what's valuable in their organization. So as AI continues to become more robust over a year, what questions or conversations that you're having that signal maturity versus noise when executives assess AI governance? Because I think right now we're still trying to grapple with what is this AI governance piece.
So I think there's I'm going to bifurcate my answers. So there's the metrics orientation, and then there's a more practical. So, and one drives the other. So starting at the metrics layer, what you end up seeing is a lot of vanity metrics. We had this many meetings about AI governance. Neat. We have this many pages of documentation about AI. We have this many telemetry signals coming out. And sorry, what? How does that show anything, buddy? That's like nothing. That means nothing. I think where I'd really like to see companies, if you can show ROI associated with your artificial intelligence implementation or product or solution, cool. That means you've got a lot in place. I think that driving to a simple math number of like, here's our profit and loss statement associated with AI that doesn't look like Microsoft's, which somebody said had squirrels and unicorns in it, which I thought was a pretty good way to read their quarterly report, right?
Okay.
I do think we have to drive to that level of financial discipline to assess, like, are we adequately, because governance does have financial impacts. Now,
Right.
the other thing, how do we drive to that level of maturity? I think that I'd like to see, and that mature companies are doing, they have, this is going to sound like a consulting answer too. Sorry, been a consultant before.
No
You
worries.
want to have an up-to-date map of how is your entity, your corporation, your company, your agency, whatever it might be. How are you meeting all of your regulatory burdens? How are you meeting all of your legal requirements? And how are you meeting all of your contractual obligations? Now, that in and of itself assumes you've got an inventory of all of those. And again, I'm saying this is a high maturity activity because you ask some companies like what your standard red lines are, if you know where your special contract terms are buried, and they go, that's an unpleasant question. Please go away. You made me sad, right? Until their attorneys ask them the same question where they get really sad. But beyond having that understanding of like, here's what we're supposed to be doing right now and what we've actually agreed to do, right? The other thing, this is the consultant answer, have a gap analysis. Like, where are you missing? And then beyond just like, what are you missing? What do you know is an actual gap? What are the skills gaps that you're missing to do that? Like if you say you're going to do AI governance, so you're in compliance with, the EU AI Act, which has yet to, well, we'll see what the Digital Omnibus does. right? Or
Yeah.
maybe with California's, or maybe with Texas's, right? But like, you're say, we're going to be compliant with that. Cool. Do you have somebody on staff, or do you have access to an expert who knows that in detail and could make an actual determination as to whether or not you are maintaining compliance or not?
Hmm.
If you don't have that, that's one of those things where you want to go seek outside expertise, or maybe say, hey, we should hire a compliance expert who can stay on top of this stuff. And that's the real challenge in the AI space, in that good governance is not static. It's not going to be something like, I don't know, we'll go for something easy here, the CMMC program,
Right.
which if anybody's out there has done CMMC, first of all, I hope you haven't been doing it for the past 4 years. But if you have, you get the joke immediately of what that's been like. AI is the fast version of that. We get a new regulatory standard, we get a new legal standard, we get a new permutation of a standard really quickly. And unless your organization has really leaned hard into either having skilled professionals where that's what they track, or somehow you're doing horizon scanning better than everybody else to figure out what's changing. I was talking to somebody the other day. They were planning for Colorado's AI Act to come on. I was like, buddy, that's not happening until summer. And they're like, what? Like, yeah,
Wow.
it got neutered. It got pushed back for a while. They're going to think about it again. But that lack of understanding of the current situation and state of play, I think, is leading a lot of companies to go, you know what, we're just going to hope that we hit regulatory escape velocity. And you know that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do your listeners know that term? Because it's a unique term.
No, I'm probably not. Please explain. Like,
Okay. So regulatory escape velocity goes like this. You hope that you are going to make so much money so quickly that you are so big that you cannot fail, or that a financial penalty or a legal penalty is going to be a rounding error on your balance sheet. This is the example of Meta getting a multi-million-dollar GDPR fines. They just reach behind the couch cushions and they pick it up and they
get their
go,
coins.
cool,
Yeah.
yeah, right? There is no actual, like, at some point, if you grow fast enough, and I think a lot of these AI companies are trying to do that, where they're going, yeah, we know there's laws, we know there's regulations, we'll pay the fine. It just becomes a tax on them.
Mm-hmm.
Most
Yep.
companies, though, if that is your strategy, it's a bit of a wild strategy to have. I hope you had a good conversation with counsel before deciding that that's what you're going to do, and it's not just your engineering team saying, hey, we're just going to swing for the fences here and hope that we don't go to court. But that's regulatory escape velocity.
Yeah. So for me, I always heard that term as, the coins in your sofa, basically, essentially. But to your point, there's so many organizations out there that I continue to get Google alerts of articles about who's been fined next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like and you're like, okay, are they not? Is anybody broke yet? Because I know if I was getting hit with all of these fines, they're not little bitty fines; they're large, substantial fines. But they're still functioning, right? So obviously for them, it's to your point, just coins in your, a few coins in your sofa. I love how you said that it's a comprehensive compliance approach is the program. Everyone sees it as, moving forward, checking the box. But you talk about a maturity model that really challenges the check the box programs.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that. My first book.
yeah. So, like, what are some of the early indicators that kind of show or that the program is only moving into a compliance posture? Or are they really moving into a strategic posture that you are advocating for? That I think right now, this is exactly what we need to be doing.
So to me, the big differentiator is not tooling, and it's not staff, and it's not necessarily documentation, though you need all of those things. You need to have people to operate the tools and have instructions on what to do. If you don't have that stuff, you're pretty much cooked. So please start over. But what I really see separates the leaders from the followers is the continuous improvement mindset. If you're going, cool, so here's our GRC program, we're just going to run it like this, and we've been running it like this for the past decade, and we're just going to keep running it like this and not going to try and make anything better. First of all, if you're an employee at a company like that, I'm sorry, that sounds really boring. You probably,
Yeah.
unless of course you've got a great outside of work life and you have interesting hobbies and friends, cool, great, that's great for you. But if you want to actually make things better, you have to lean into that and say, what can we improve? And then at a management and an executive level, what's the value of doing that improvement? Can you actually track that value of improving it? You were talking about third-party risk management before. One of the things that I've seen and counseled companies to do is your typical sales cycle, right? We've talked about this. You have the AE, the account executive, has a nice conversation. Maybe the SE, the solutions engineer, shows a demo. The prospect says, cool, here's our 6,000-page questionnaire. It includes questions about your backup tape robot schedule and your antivirus. Please fill it out and let us know how that goes for you. And so you go and fill it out, and that just slows the whole sales cycle down.
Yep.
And nobody likes it. And the salesperson says, well, this is a job for the CISO, who notably did not get into the world, into their industry, into their role to say, yeah, I'm going to spend my day filling out Excel spreadsheets because that sounds cool. Yeah,
That's
I
fun.
love that, right? And so what I've counseled companies to do, and what others have been doing, is how far can we front load that? Can we get a certification? Can we get an attestation? Can we get a SOC 2? Can we get an ISO 27001 or 2 or 42001? Can we publish that in a trust center? Can we make that trust center available on the internet for somebody either under NDA or not under NDA? Your dealer's choice on that one. Talk to your attorneys. Don't talk to me. This is not legal advice. But can you get that up there? And then can you get metrics on that? How often are people asking for your GDPR certificate of compliance? How often are they looking at your SOC 2? And then what are they looking for that's not in your trust center? And that's where we can start going towards that continuous improvement mindset of where we go, cool, we've given them everything. Our sales cycle has gone from 8 weeks of Excel hell down to 2 days to get to actual negotiations. That's a heck of an improvement. But they asked about these 27 things that we don't have. Can we build some of those? If you plumb for telemetry early, what it allows us to do is to continuously improve an organization's cybersecurity, but we're doing it not for the sake of technology, because technology is neat. No, we're doing it because the business needs these things, and it makes for an easier conversation. The other thing I'd say that gives us, the other thing is that if you have the defensibility to say how much money is associated with a given program in terms of net revenue. A friend of mine, CISO at a company that I won't name, had an executive walk into her office and said, look, we need to cut the budget. We see there's, I think it was about a $10 million in controls, right? We see these $10 million, we don't know what they're for. So we just want to get rid of them because we need to save ourselves $10 million and we don't know what this is for. So she and her staff went and did a little bit of math and went back the next week and talked to the other executive and said, hey, buddy, do you like $1 billion? Yeah, why? Well, that's how much those $10 million are getting us in terms of controls, because it was their FedRAMP program. It's like, so shut up and get out of my office, get out of my way, don't talk to me again, done.
Yeah.
Makes it very straightforward, where we have that association of control cost and staff cost associated with revenue. If you can do that, you're at a high maturity organization. You're not a cost center. You're probably not in a perilous state right now in 2026. If you can't have that conversation, if you can't measure the impact that you're making, that's why I started to write the parts in the maturity model around getting from like the starting spot to actually moving to a level of maturity, to have that telemetry built in. But it's not just tools, it's not just people, it's not just documentation, it's a mindset thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now for all compliance expert, is really moving from more of a traditional perspective of, to your point, those 3 main things, documentation, auditing, all of those things, to a what is the revenue value? Because right now that's driving the actual market and what's available in the space. And so I want to talk about 2 things, because we're getting close to wrapping up, is regulatory pressures. You talked about, being able to bake in the business strategy up front for compliance and cybersecurity, so that if you do it up front, meaning you're getting the ISOs and the SOC 2s and all of those things, then that helps with the overall revenue development, and it adds value to your team and what you bring to the table. But my question to you is, what do organizations overreact with? Maybe, an additional to, where do organizations overreact and where do they under prepare? So they overreact in one component, but they underprepare in another, because I think that really helps kind of set the foundation of, I think there's a small portion of our industry, either commercial or government, that is really highly mature. Most of them are still trying to figure it out. And depending upon where the organization is evolving to, should we overreact with the EU AI Act, or are they underprepared with the DORA Act or SCE or SEC rules? Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you brought up DORA, and that is a great example. I know a lot of companies that looked at DORA or didn't look at DORA, and they didn't know that it applied to them, that they were ICT. And unfortunately, they got a contractual revision from somebody in the banking industry in the EU or somebody in the finance industry that said, hey, you know what? Now you're DORA compliant, right? Right? Absolute panic moment
Right.
across the field when DORA first rolled, because there were a lot of companies that didn't think that it was them. They're just some MSP. They're just some software vendor. They're just some SaaS solution that does a thing. And sure, maybe a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund and financial advice firm runs your stuff, but clearly not, actually it turns out it's totally you. Or you're running, like for the entities that are regulated under DORA, I think that they didn't say that, oh, well, we need to have a backup for Zoom, right? Until the DNS failed and they went, oh, cool, our financial clients can't have a phone call with our advisors anymore. And that's actually a problem under DORA. Even though they don't own Zoom, they don't make Zoom, they just they use Zoom, and they went, oh, cool, maybe we need to have a backup plan here. And that's where I think they underprepare, where they don't understand the potential materiality associated with it. And again, that comes to that earlier point of, hey, hire a dedicated person, or maybe build a perfect AI that's going to go do horizon scanning. Please let me know when you do that. I'd love to see it work. It sounds neat. But I think that's like the solution there, is get eyes on this stuff and keep abreast of it. But the downside is that I'd say companies underreact, or they fail to react if there's uncertainty. Like what we saw with, I'll go back to CMMC. CMMC has been just first of all, cybersecurity maturity model certification. It had a 1.0 release. Boy, was that terrible. It also came from DFARS, which also kind of terrible. And people just they thought, oh, this isn't going to happen. They thought that it was not going to be a thing. And so a lot of companies, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, heck, primes, decided, we'll do this later. Right? Well, now it's actually a contractual obligation because it actually happened. But when there's that potentiality that it's not going to happen, they will underinvest. They'll say, well, we'll litigate our way out of this. We will lobby our way out of this. We will deal with it later, because the cost of change is so potentially high when there's no obvious benefit associated with that. And I think we see that we saw that in Colorado with their AI Act. And I think we're going to see a bit of that this year in 2026 with the digital omnibus out of the EU, where they're saying, we might change the GDPR up here a little bit, folks. We might also change up the EU AI Act a smidge, right? I think that's going to take compliance programs associated with that and have people say, do we need to tap the brakes? Like, are we building the wrong solution for the right problem because the problem statement's going to change? I think that's where we see companies that are especially low maturity, or where they don't prioritize compliance as a strategic advantage. I think that's where they go, yeah, cool, we're just going to put that project on hold. Let's go find something else to do with our time.
Yeah, I totally agree, which kind of brings us to our wrap-up question. So it's a perfect segue. You talked about the changing and basically the landscape, right, of the EU Act. I mean, there's maybe changing the GDPR. So for the CISOs and GRC leaders that are trying to just adopt either an AI protocols, or just overall good, solid foundational cybersecurity behaviors, what disciplines really matter that would make an organization more credible and more effective, in your opinion, that could, over the next 2 years? Like, is it, going after those certifications? Is it really taking a moment to pause to reevaluate your current cybersecurity posture, or reevaluate the skill sets that's available in your team? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So it's not so much a discipline. It's more of a way of thinking. I'd say we have to be curious. We have to be curious both about technology, because that keeps changing, And many of us got into this business because of technology. But we also have to be curious about other people. Like, if you can understand what is driving, what is motivating the other business leaders at your organization, you are going to be so much better prepared to support the business than if you don't understand that. We can't, as GRC professionals, as cybersecurity professionals, we can't just operate with blinders on anymore and go, well, I'm just a little guy and I just do my little thing. Because if we do that, we don't understand why there are these larger unknown forces. Maybe the company's doing mergers and acquisitions, and that's why you don't have cyber budget this year. Right? Maybe they've decided, hey, we're going to build an AI product, and they tell development first and they tell security last because security was seen as an impediment. We need to be curious. We need to build those human relationships, person to person, over coffee or tea or drinks or whatever. Just go find other people in your organization. Find out, like, what is the thing that you're doing in your language, not my language. I code switch with them all day long, please, to understand what's the motivation, because that's what builds for an enduring program as opposed to a technology heavy, vanity metric heavy, meaningless program that's going to get whacked.
That's perfect. You heard it here on my GRC POV, guys. We need to build community and relationships and collaborate and build a collective in your organization, because we cannot be a standalone organization around security. It has to be a team effort. So that means that you have to go shake a hand, make a friend. At least that's what my family used to tell me. Go shake a hand, make a friend, right? So Kayne, thank you so much. Like, I could probably go on for like another 15, 20 minutes. You're just full of great wisdom, and you break it down to such practical terms for people to understand. And one of the things you mentioned in our conversation is that you have a book coming out later this year. So tell us a little bit more, if you will. And then when should we expect it? Because I want my copy. Thanks.
So I'm working with the publisher right now. It's a UK-based publisher, and it's in the review phase. I've never.
Nice.
My first book was published by my employer. My second book is by an honest-to-goodness publisher. Never worked with a publisher before. Learning so much. Like, don't write your draft in Notepad. Maybe Microsoft Word exists for a reason, and maybe learn how the index feature works. Because that was a challenge. But I expect it's going to come out probably second half of this year. The title of it is GRC. The title of that book is Cyber Risk is a Myth. Because I sincerely do believe that it is a absolute fiction, and it breaks down the communications barriers and then what we can do proactively as both individuals as well as if we're in leadership roles, how we can help change that narrative at our organizations. I'm going to have a lot of, I think there's about 40 workshops and worksheets and templates and downloadable assets that will be associated with it as well. Initially, I had them all in the book, and they were like, yeah, this is a textbook. This is too long. But you spend enough time in consulting, you go, what would I need to actually do a consulting engagement to assess if a company is ready to stop talking about cyber risk and start talking about business risk and do proper business impact analysis and actually inventory our systems and be able to communicate this as a strategic advantage. All of that's in there. Again, just working with an editor. At some point, they're going to ask me to pick a picture that goes on the front. I have no idea how to do that, but I'm learning a lot, which makes it fun.
Well, listen, I am super excited to hear about it, because if it comes as comprehensive as it literally, hopefully it's going to be a full brain dump of Kayne McGladrey, then I think it's dope. And so that means we're going to have to bring you back when it's out and published and have you talk more about your book and how it's going to impact the world. So Kayne, listen, where can everyone find you? Where can we connect with you?
So we can thank my mom and dad for my poor OPSEC. There is literally one Kayne McGladrey in the world. If you Google me, if you look for me on LinkedIn, if you look for me on YouTube, I am there. That's pretty much the only social media I'm on, although if you get on my Signal, good for you. You will see so many cat GIFs in my Signal, actually. But in general, it's going to be on LinkedIn, I'm Kayne McGladrey, and on YouTube, I'm Kayne McGladrey.
Fantastic. Listen, guys, make sure you check out Kayne on LinkedIn. Make sure you reach out to him, and then check out his YouTube. It's great. It's a few 10 minutes shorts about different topics and variations in cybersecurity and leadership and GRC. It's worth the time, especially when you're trying to research and say, what else do I need to know? You have a place to go. So listen, Kayne, Thank you so much for the conversation. I am looking forward to your book coming out. I'm hoping that we get to hang out again later part of this year, but I'm going to let you give us like our closing message. What is one thing you want the GRC space to know or to make sure that you get across in this episode today?
So right now, 2026 is not going to be an easy year. I'm not going to soft pedal this one. 2026 is going to be a hard year for a lot of people. And right now we are in a macroeconomic cycle associated with efficiency. And what efficiency means is getting more for the same amount or getting more for less. And so when you're thinking about what you need to do, whether you're a senior compliance officer, whether you're a compliance analyst, we need to build really strong relationships with the business. We need to articulate the value that we bring to the business, and we need to be part of those conversations. If there's not a chair at the table, like stand in the back, get into the room, get into the conversation, understand what are the big motivators right now in your organization for business initiatives, and then how can you proactively, that's weird, right? How can you proactively support them, not wait for them to come to you to say, hey, we've decided we're going to do AI in Latin America. What's that like? Get in that conversation early. Decide like, hey, find out that so that you can plan for it, so you can budget for it, and so also so you can help the organization understand and make well-informed decisions rather than just going, yeah, it'll probably be fine. We'll tell the compliance people they'll get it done in 6 weeks. Right? That's what we've been doing for years. We know how that goes. But again, going to be a hard year, especially if you don't build those relationships. As you said, shake a hand, make a friend. I love that. I might borrow that and use that advice this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. One of the things that I think is important is building relationships in community. We are not going to be able to be effective in this year or beyond without community. And so this is a great way to do it. I had a previous guest that said something very powerful, that the GRC cybersecurity space is a close proximity group. So once you build that relationship, we're going to be in this for the long haul. So listen, this is not a lone wolf type of environment. This is build your network, build a community, and stay connected. So with all of that said, Kayne, thank you so much for this conversation. I am totally excited. I've learned a ton. Of course, that's why I do this podcast, wanted to learn for myself, but also to make sure I share with our community. And so to all of my listeners, if this episode sharpened how you think and how you see cyber risk, AI governance, GRC execution, then make sure you follow My GRC POV on any of your preferred platforms. And if anything, share this episode with a leader who needs a clear signal and a strong execution. Because let me tell you, this was a plethora of conversation. What you did not hear is about theory and frameworks. What you heard is we need to build community. So until next time, bye guys. Thanks for listening to My GRC POV. Remember, all opinions expressed today are personal views only and don't reflect any organizational positions. Until next time, own the risk and execute with intent.